Hi there, welcome to the Dylan Rounds case and the latest talk about it within the community. Today I want to catch up with a certain forum page of interest and check the reactions from people over that way because I've not been around there since, and there's been some new post as well, and it does go into May the month, so it'll be interesting to see what people have had to say in recent time, their thoughts, their questions, to see if anything of interest pops up, whether it be new information, research done, or key questions which haven't been asked yet, maybe I could even respond to them, just depending on what the forum is. You'll be aware of it because we've looked at it in the past. For anyone watching right now in this live premiere, it might be quiet, it might be small, but to those that are present, welcome. Share your thoughts, opinions in the live chat, right-hand side of the screen, and anyone in general, you got any thoughts or comments, questions, list them down below under this video. And as well, pinned comment below, you'll find one by me with some additional links. If you wish to check them out, feel free to do so. And top right corner of the screen, just above, you click on that where the eye symbol is, you'll be able to catch up on recent videos of mine in case you've missed out. There you go. So besides looking at this forum and the new post and whatever's going on over there, you can also do a quick attitude check with the odd person as well in the background, such as Kurt Wadsworth's daughter, Taylina. I mean, people can say, don't bring this, don't bring that. Well, I monitor human behaviour, their behavioural patterns, their attitudes, and in recent time, I noticed a change and shift within some of us out there. But in this case, this is reflecting back on what's happened from the past, putting into perspective, whether people like it or not, it's going to happen, okay? Not messing about. But that can be saved for later on. And I do have screenshots which we can analyse and run over, okay? Not literally run over in a car like Watch Your Crazy, but you get the idea. So that's for later. Just make sure to stick around so you understand everything, and just feel free to listen in. Let's head straight on over to a poll first, because I've just reminded myself. Might as well bring it up into discussion briefly in regards to what I did last night, where we're talking about the importance, the significance of Dylan Brown's burial, where he was originally buried by Brenner. Not the grave site, not the one that Bob Farrell's obsessed about, but the actual burial site where Dylan was disposed of. The interest behind it, the importance, how it could link to one thing or the other, but then also the question of when will it be released, that information, and will it ever be? I did a poll on my channel just yesterday. Let's check out the voting results and see what people have had to say. Around 67 people have voted at this moment in time of recording. Voting results could vary later on, but just looking at it right now, 36% of people believe that the burial site of where Dylan was found by authorities will be revealed to the public at some point. 36 people agree. But 36% of people who voted said never. Interesting, yes and no, kind of mixed. And then 28% of people saying that they don't know. Me personally, I'm not able to vote on my own polls, how unfortunate. But if I had to pick, I would say possibly, but in time, not immediately. Because when looking back at some of the other evidence and developments along the way, I mean, the best example would be the time-lapse footage, critical evidence, key turning point within the case, and incriminating Brenner, of course. And that was discovered by LE in November of 2022. We heard about it, and I guess so did the family, March 2023. Quite some time passed in between, right? So the same could happen here. Of course, the main positive is Dylan Rounds was found, recovered, and there has been closure, a step in the right direction for justice, etc. But to, gather all the pieces together, it would create a better, more understanding story of how things played out and why it took so long, or how it took so long, and how much distance was covered to get from point A to point B, stuff like that. And I still think that there should be a level of patience in between, because not everything has to or needs to be rushed. Of course, people want to know, and in a way, in a very small way, people have the right to know of public information. But I guess it's a time and place when it does come. But I do feel that it will be revealed in time. I mean, if Candice Cooley wants to tell her side of the story, like how she hinted at on that Facebook page post, it might entail that. As for the Dr. Phil episode, that would be outdated now, because supposedly it was underway before Dylan was found. So I don't know if that would ever be published or edited, or it's already been aired. I'm not too sure about that. But I don't think it's as significant now, with obviously the last bit of breaking news that came about, which was what? Was it 9th? Was it 9th of April? I can't remember now. Something on the 9th. But yeah, just wanted to throw this up now and just add on my additional thoughts in general. Okay. So now, let's head on over to that forum page in regards to recent ongoing discussions, what people had to say. On screen, the last outdated post by Grandma Bear was February 29, 2024, and that was some reference to this guy here, Profiling Evil. And the last I heard of Profiling Evil, he took a visit down to the farm area and the Grangeshed property to record some footage with a drone and then send it in to Dr. Phil with that episode with Candice Cooley. Don't know what happened since then, it's gone quiet, but I'm just showing you where we were last at, okay? February 29th, hadn't watched it. And then April 9th, out of nowhere, Dylan Round's body found. And that's by Paradise. I don't know if that's a familiar name to anyone. Some people reacting to it. Mel70, I've seen them before, I believe. Are we at the top of the screen? I think we are. See, when was this actually? Was this created June 9th, 2022, or is that just a pinned post? It might just be pinned. Scrolling on down, final page, April 9th. So the reactions by people, holy beep, seriously, never expected to come in and see this. I figured it was about the case against Brenner or something. Yeah, I mean, when you reflect back, how many of you thought Dylan would never be found? I mean, to believe that at the time is a normal feeling, because you think how long the case has gone on for, and you take in consideration the vastness and how open it is, and you hear about searches conducted here and there with no results yielding success, you'd probably lose hope. But like how I worded, Brenner, the key to the location, just like how you could put the argument across. It's not as solid or concrete, but at some point in the past, argument was with the Kenny Veach case. You want to find Kenny Veach, you got to find the cave. The cave is the key to finding Kenny, just like how if you want to find the cave, finding Kenny is the key to the location of the cave, because if Kenny's gone out there searching for the cave, that's where he probably would be. That was just one concept in the past. So you get the idea. Grandma Bear, horse thief hunter. Interesting. What else do people have to say? Wow, so rarely happens. So the perpetrator gave it up in exchange for a plea deal. I'm not giving him a pat on the back, but most won't even then give the body to the family, because they know then it is known they killed them and their last bit of control over the family. Yeah, but Brenner gave in. Haven't listened to all yet, but it would not surprise me if Dylan's parents were willing to offer some deal or tell authorities they could in exchange for their son. But I believe the parents aren't in control of that. Hopefully it is not too sweet of one, but this still rarely happens. I'll give him credit for doing the right thing, although whether it was for self or for the parents, that's debatable. True. And obviously, ever since, we've not heard the details of the plea deal. And as it was mentioned in that article by Cade Palmer, I think the deputy of Box Elder, saying how because of the legal reasons and things that are ongoing, it can't be revealed publicly yet. I mean, if the preliminary does happen with Brenner, what happens after that? Do any more details come out or not? Grumwood says, so now, even though they knew at heart, what a sad night for his parents and all for all. It's just hitting me. There is little doubt, but a 19-year-old kid remains found, now known dead. That bites. After how long of tooth and nail fighting and looking, this has to hit home hard. Paradise. I'm just glad the family has closure. Oh no, is Grandma Bear back in with the long paragraphs like in the past? I guess we now know for the case it's all but over, as some deal was reached and has been recovered. I only wonder if they also asked for any explanation, not that it would necessarily be true anyhow, and where he was found and whether he would have ever been found without the information. True. See, the way I work from this is, if we knew the location of where Dylan Rounds was originally buried at by Brenner, and if it just so happened to be an area that was already searched in the past, then you could say there might not have been much hope in finding Dylan, especially with it being described as a shallow grave. Some people last night said all murder cases are described as a shallow grave, but you never know, you might get the odd exception, because we've got to take in consideration, you look at Brenner, he's a lazy person, half-hearted effort at doing stuff. A shallow grave by the hands of Brenner really wouldn't surprise me, right? But if it turned out, if we found the location and it's been revealed, and it just so happened to be such a remote area which was never searched by the family or police or anyone else, you could put the argument across and say maybe with time, if they went in that direction, they would have found Dylan. But those questions are still up for debate right now. Grandma Bear says, rest in peace, Dylan. We have a Dylan in my family. Right. It's just so wrong what is going on in this world today. You get upset at people if that is what it was, fine. Get in and storm off. You don't murder them, for God's sake. I mean, that's a pretty vague description now, because you can have the concept of a person may upset you or trigger you in a little disagreement or some like little bits of name calling and petty behavior, and reacting by murdering someone is overkill, literally, and unnecessary. But you do get forms of bullying, you do get forms of harassment, abuse, manipulation, really full-on dark stuff and all kinds of messy situations out there. It's not just quite clear-cut in a vague way as put here, but something bad happens to you, you don't react back in that such way. There'll always be exceptions in this world, in this life. In the situation though with Dylan Rounds and Brenner, there was no reason at all to take it out on Dylan in that way and resort to killing. Unless there was some missing details, an additional motive behind Brenner, but really what we've looked at and assessed when it comes to James Brenner, with a form of jealousy, long-standing jealousy, bit of hatred building with time, like how Justin Rounds overheard those conversations and that tone of voice matching that theme, the form of jealousy in the past. You can add it together. Brenner, defensiveness, whether he's startled by an unknown person at the time, overreacts, any damage done to stuff on site, whether it's Brenner's property or not, defensive there, like a horse gate, if it was damaged by Dylan accidentally, if a horse was startled, Briscoe's at the time, could be defensive. I have done videos in the past looking deeper into this, so if you are interested, feel free to check back. Okay. Right, where are we at here? And maybe that's part of what is wrong. Whether agree or not, when you believe there is a reason to be a decent person, follow some morals and some rules, and there are consequences if you don't. But at the same time, you can be a good person in this world, and you can be worse off than a bad person. Okay? Some people will use certain lines and references as a comfort blanket, kind of like how people will use the comfort blanket line of, oh, you see that person over there? They're full of hatred and negativity. That's only because they don't have much of a life, or they have a sad life, or that they're alone and no one wants to be with them. But at the end of the day, that can be used as a comfort blanket, because sometimes those people who may be full of hatred or maybe negative or maybe toxic might end up having a much better life than you do. Okay? It's not just one way all the time. It does mix and match and varies. Sometimes bad people are better off than good people. Other times good people are better off than bad people. It's mixed. It's random. Could be a bit of a lottery at times in different ways. And that's just me being realistic, as you know. Now, what else? There are consequences if you don't, and one sees a whole lot less of it. Add in years of no such thing, so common laws and sentences getting lax, drugs gone crazy and allowed to, and this and what one gets in this world. Not that there hasn't always been crime, but nothing like these days. Okay. I don't know if she'll head right off doing it, but once having a chance to grieve, I'm sure Candice Cooley, and take the hard charging off for a bit, I think Candice Cooley will have a lot to say and want to make a difference. I could be wrong, but that's my prediction. I'm happy that they got their son back. I'm sad that it was that outcome, but to be honest, it was obvious by that point, being realistic. Prayers for the family. I even hope Brenner did it for even a small of a reason, a soul, for the right way, but that's doubtful. It was a bit hard to read, but I kind of get what the point across there. The bit about Candice Cooley taking things in and then moving forward to the next step. To be honest, Candice Cooley has already done that with the Dylan Rounds legacy and Missing in America network and trying to network, branch out with other people out there and families. So that's already happening. But as for Candice Cooley's next move and maybe telling the full story of Dylan Rounds and the ending to it, such as the location, the burial site, and any additional information of interest, that will be good to see if it does come out with time. What was that bang sound then? Noisy neighbours. Grandma Bear. Just watching the rest of what you posted by Nate. Clearly they contacted Nate and probably a few others. What? Haven't looked yet. It's short, but Nate is always so respectful and not sensational and knows his case and cares for the families. He's doing good coverage on it and hitting the points in story and relation as to where found, etc. He has a live on right now for Daybell, but I haven't looked yet as I'm watching this recording, and he's sharing pictures. Hugs to the family and thanks for the news. I didn't think he'd be found. Right, so Nate Eaton did do a bit of coverage on that breaking news of Dylan being found. It was fairly short, and it was just basically telling the story of what we've already heard, basically. Bit of a brief summary from the past, and a rough description of where Dylan was found, but nowhere to be specific, just in Lucin, Utah, and that was it, okay? We have seen some knobheads along the way in recent time pushing the agenda that it was on the side of Bald Eagle Mountain in Montello, Nevada, people pushing that concept and saying that is the location and Tunnel Springs is the spot. A lot of bullshitters who claim to know a lot when they don't really. Jumping the gun as well. I guess JLR doesn't do any favours either. I mean, JLR moves about so often with case to case, whilst that's a good thing. Coming into the Dylan Rounds case, just rushing on in and saying this is the spot, that sounds a bit reckless to me. Of course, when the consistency follows and when it's officially mentioned and stated, whether it be family or authority, that will help seal the understanding completely. Now, what's this one? Probably the same info as the video. Right, so this was just the article at the time, okay? By East Idaho News. Body of Dylan Rounds found in remote Utah desert, family says. Eastern Idaho, being missing for nearly 2 years, recovered Tuesday morning in a remote part of northern Utah near the Nevada line, according to his family. So, near the Nevada line, not over, not crossing the line, not crossing the border, but near to Nevada. I guess people didn't understand that at the time. We thank everyone for their support and love. That's by Candice Cooley. Grateful we now have Dylan's body and can bring him home and continue our fight for justice. James Brenner charged aggravated murder, use of desecration of a human body, connection to Brown's death. He, Brenner, led authorities to the location of the burial site Tuesday morning as part of a plea agreement. Cooley says family members were told about it around 11 a.m. that skeletal remains had been found and authorities believed they are Dylan Rounds, and then later they were confirmed to be Dylan. FBI assisted Box Elder by processing the area for evidence and recovering the remains. The remains are in possession of the Utah office medical examiner for confirmation and identity, and as we saw, the update was it was confirmed. Kimster says, my boss just told me he was found. Dylan, people all over the country are happy. Your remains are going home to your loved ones. Fly with the angels. What's this one? Mel. I'm sure it was a plea deal. It was. The Wetterlings had to accept a deal to find him and to hear exactly what happened so that Danny Heinrich would not be charged with the murder and do his time in federal prison for the 19 ring binders of... Right, I don't know what we're talking about there. Bloody hell. Glad he was found. That means so much for a grieving family. Right, so has this got something to do with a different case, but there's similarities or something? Whatever, I'll just briefly read it. Yeah, it's almost for certain totally self-serving. I'd hope an out for a girl and the family be but doubtful. Those that can commit such crimes aren't that kind of person. I hope they didn't go with too great of a deal or too little time. It wasn't a DP case and whatever. Yeah, I think that's something else, to be honest. What's this? Hi, mein Freund. Und Alban von Bunny. Guten Tag. Oh, got some German here. Mein Freund. I was going to say Mein Kampf just then. Oops, wrong one. Hi, Mel. Glad they found him. The family is okay with the deal, so am I. And as we know, the family weren't pleased with the concept of a deal in the past, but times have changed. Victims and their families first, always. They have questions, needs or suggestions, and they should be listened to and all that can be done or answers given by provided. They're okay and agreed to this and perhaps whatever. Family Dylan Rounds announced non-profit in his memory, and this was May 4th, so, we're getting on now. So we've got May the 4th be with you. In a statement on Wednesday, the family Dylan Rounds announced the creation of a non-profit in his honour. To be honest, I'm not quite sure if this is what we read yesterday or so. Yes, it is, isn't it? So we don't really need to read it. It's basically the same thing. We kindly request privacy and respect as we grieve the passing of our beloved Dylan. So those entitled people in the background that are like, we needed to know the grave. We need to know the actual grave so we can visit the graveyard and take selfies like how Bob Fowler said. And we need to know the burial site as well to have a trip down there. All kinds of points made. And yet how it's mentioned here, the family request privacy at this moment for the grieving because they weren't able to grieve beforehand, only now. So give or take time, the information should come out. What's this? Wake of it, chosen to channel our grief in a positive force in the name of Dylan's legacy, a non-profit organisation to help families in similar situations. Serves as a beacon, hope and support, as we saw. Through the non-profit, the family is hoping to provide resources and guidance, emotional support, etc. Express their gratitude. It does say they invite individuals and organisations to join them in their mission to make a positive impact. There we go. And as well, Dylan's legacy. Through this 501c3 non-profit, the Cooley Rounds family aims to provide resources, guidance, emotional support from community awareness, partnering with search and rescue organisations, advocating for policy changes. Dylan's legacy will strive to make a meaningful difference in the lives of others facing the uncertainty of a missing family member. Establishing Dylan's legacy is our way of honouring Dylan's memory and ensuring that the families facing similar circumstances receive the assistance and compassion. Yep. May 5th. She was a mama bear and still is. Is mama bear just like a reference to being a mother? Grandma Bear says, I too at times thought, don't get L.E. riled up by having a fit at what wasn't being done, but I also understood it totally. Most go along and I had the same struggle, different circumstances. You want to know every day what is being done, and when there is silence, you worry. Anything is being done and so on, and most of us never have such a thing happen or understand the system or process, only like in their case, their son wasn't even found dead when they would have known that he was missing. What are you talking about? I think she and Dad, Justin, have been instrumental in it all and come around over time, and they're reeling to getting what mattered most, where he was, and getting him back. That's my guess, and probably even suggested how to put it to his killer and pressure and offer a deal. This is total guessing on my part. Maybe we find out the motive and the true reasoning why Brenner decided to open up now and why the plea deal was successful now compared to the past. Goes on to say, I hope they do affect change because it's true that families need more than what they're reeling. There is a disconnect, and it's not because Ellie is doing wrong. They have their job and you have your need for answers, not family's fault, and it isn't Ellie's either in most cases. Each is in their own spot and Ellie doing their job. One would think what they would have done, etc. That court victims advocates would bridge that gap, but they don't. You need to hear from the detectives or the sheriff, or at least be in regular touch with one. We had to seek it. We did get it. It was still frustrating and almost beyond what we were going through at times. Wasn't their fault. Families need to not only be managed, but know some things, and now you're on it. So it seems like Grandma Bear, in a way, is kind of defending the LE in the Dylan Rounds case, but let's just remember the LE in the Dylan Rounds case didn't quite take it serious enough at the beginning and mishandled some evidence in how they treated it, and that no forensics was supposedly done in certain areas, which it was needed. It expired, that DNA, with time, and also that LE didn't always have the correct resources or delayed certain ones, the drone, because no pilots, the bloodhound unit at the start, messy situation like that, and then supposedly the LE joking and mocking the parents at the start as well. Not exactly professional, is it? So I think there was some shortcomings by them, because you've seen how the LE paint a perfect pretty picture these days in the articles and newspapers. They don't mention anything bad about themselves or the shortcomings, they just mention all the positives, which is typical. Anyway, what's this? I see similar in the Idaho 4 and Kaylee's mom and dad. If you wonder who Kaylee is, we're not talking about the giggler. We're talking about Kaylee Goncalves. I think that's their last name. Is it Kaylee Goncalves? Correct me if I'm wrong. But Kaylee from the Idaho 4 case, one of the victims in the murder. But the mother and father of Kaylee, quite outspoken at times and continue to be. Again, I do get it. It's what I almost did or wanted to do and spilled a bit at times. But so long as that detective talked to me when I told him my whole family was about to lose it, and he'll tell me and calm me down and give what he could and the reasons why we couldn't. But what I also watched, the defences in cases like the Delphi and Reed and Morphew putting on a public blitz while prosecutions have to or think wise to stay silent. It has to change, has to. Our perpetrator did the same thing, and his family, well, not like national publicity, but held court and gave their lies to area people and so on for months on end, whilst our side was to stay silent but had to hear and live with this stuff every single day, or say, he did do it. Want to hear what we know and what he did? Good for them. Sorry you lost your son, Dylan Rounds, rest in peace. And you're on your back, and that's where it came to his foremost goal, always justice too. Right, so that seems to be it for now. I'm sure this page will be updated with time if any news articles come out, or if the plea deal details are mentioned, or the location is. And like I said, when that stuff comes out too, I'll cover it. The one thing that hasn't been talked about as much is the autopsy report. Whilst most people are more so interested as to where Dylan Rounds was found, equally as important, it should be acknowledged, the questioning and the intrigue of how Dylan Rounds was murdered, because then it creates that full picture and understanding. Okay, we know Dylan Rounds was murdered, that's what's been said. We know in the past there were some awkward people in the community that kept saying, but how do we know? And was it really his blood? And maybe it wasn't. And I don't know why people were being so awkward at times, but then again, as we saw, as time went on, they became problematic from the start, but not quite surface level in awareness or knowing, but we saw it eventually. That's a small scale observation there, I just thought I'd throw it in. But, the autopsy report, okay, they've done the identification that it was Dylan Rounds' body found. I'm assuming during that identification process, an autopsy was conducted. Correct me if I'm wrong. But if that was done at the same time, I wonder what conclusion they came to. Surely the LE would have an idea by now, possibly. Maybe even the family. Would it ever be told, the story? Possibly. Because there are some unanswered questions, because whilst the time-lapse footage is in time and in sync with how one event followed with the other, such as Dylan's death, and then the time-lapse footage of Brenner during the aftermath in his trailer with the blood on him, likely from Dylan, and DNA on the shirt too, cleaning a firearm, which was never confirmed to be Dylan's or Brenner's. They just mentioned it as a firearm being cleaned. My question always has been, Was that firearm used just before in the murder of Dylan Rounds, before 7:27 a.m. on the 28th of May 2022? Was that firearm used, yes or no? And if it was, whose firearm does it belong to or in possession of at the time? Is it Dylan Round's firearm used against him, or Brenner's? Or a firearm Brenner stolen and then used it himself, but it wasn't Dylan's? Questions like that. And once knowing the method of murder and how things played out there, was if it's a certain item or object, was that ever found? Like a firearm, a blunt instrument, a knife, an object, were they ever found? If not, it's probably doesn't really matter, because there's very likely enough evidence already by now. But there's no harm in getting as much evidence as you can just to complete it, so you understand from start to finish. And it's important to know the story from start to finish, considering how this case has gone and how outsiders have told their story. And it's not always been truthful. That's unfortunate. So the questions of Dylan's burial site, where Brenner disposed of Dylan at the time, the location would be of interest to know in time, and the autopsy report as well, how Dylan Rounds was murdered. In time, when there's the right time and when people are willing to open up. It'll be interesting to learn then, and then maybe I can tick many things off the list. And whenever that does happen, I can do my videos and take that into consideration. So be on the lookout for those videos. But one thing that needs to be looked into now, and it's only brief, it's just an observation, whether some out there like it or not, you would have known by the title, something to do with problematic people or attitude problems. We're going to be looking at Kurt Wadsworth's daughter, known as Taylina. That's what we're looking at now. Just to highlight, not a big deal, but like with any other human out there who may act problematic at times or act a little bit defensive in unnecessary ways and use certain language and wording as well, it needs to be documented. Done it before, done it with a wide range of humans, it's happening again. And just as a heads up, if one decides to complain and says, why are you continuing this? Why are you bringing it up? It is what it is, it's over and done with, whatever. I'm not continuing it. I'm just finishing what I started, which was making observations along the way within the case, within the community, and that is all. The one that is continuing is the person who's being defensive. And when we look at the comments, we'll know who really is defensive at times. And the reasoning as well behind what they say and why they didn't act on this or that, it just doesn't quite correlate anymore with what we know of in the public eye, okay? It will make more sense when we get onto the screenshots, but just for context or reference, it comes back to yesterday, okay? Yesterday, in my live premiere, later on in the video, just so happened that Taylina, Kurt Wadsworth's daughter, showed up in the live premiere. No issues, just talking about Bob Farrell, calling him out like how other people were doing. So, okay, fair enough. And then towards the end, I made a reference to the situation of Don Hatley's place of living, Don Hatley being the longtime friend of Brenner, and the location as to where Brenner visited on the day of Dylan's murder later on in the day for that barbecue of a Memorial Day weekend. And it was trying to understand, was that area of high interest in the case? Did Brenner plant anything over that way? Was Dylan Rounds buried over that way? We don't know. Nothing's been confirmed, nothing's been mentioned at all. As we know, it's very vague. With time, it'll be interesting to see if there's any link or proximity, distance close by or far away. And we'll look into that with time. I was just simply highlighting last night as a valid point made that Taylina refused to give the location of Don Hatley's place of living in fear it could harm the case. That's very normal and understandable. I get it. Arguably sensitive information. But when that came about, when I was asking and when Taylina responded, that was a few months ago, okay? Was it now over a year ago or something, the Dylan Rounds documentary aired? Before me questioning about Don's place and before Taylina saying why she can't reveal the location. And yet the documentary basically revealed the location, okay? Now I'm going to show you the comments by Taylina right now to show you the defensiveness, the attitude issues, the problematic nature of them and how they act and conduct themselves, whether they like it or not. I've applied it to many other humans out there. This isn't exclusive on just one person. I'm just following standard formal procedures because that's what I do. Whilst a case and the victim of a case is important to solve and look into and research, it's also important to monitor behavioural patterns, trends and changes, shifts within human action, human nature of those associated or assigned to a case, involved in the community of a case, who may be a witness of a case, or just somehow attached to the case. Right? We need to look into those people as well. Because if certain people aren't cooperating, that can raise levels of suspicion at times. If some people aren't cooperating or being awkward and problematic, are they causing harm to the case? It's all about balancing it out. Now, before Taylina throws their toys out the pram, I'm not saying that they are disrupting anything or harming anything. It's just that they are acting, or at least were acting, as a gatekeeper of information when realistically that information was already of public knowledge in the past. It was just kind of hard to come by if you didn't know which direction to look in. But at the end of the day, the information which they said they can't release because it's sensitive and it could harm the case, it was already publicly made aware and brought to light within the official Dylan Rounds documentary. So it wouldn't have caused any harm at all when the documentary already aired it long beforehand, and Heavy D did the same thing basically when using the flyby footage over there. It just wasn't labelled at the time, but the documentary definitely labelled it. Now, when I show you the screenshots, there's only so many. The rest of the conversation was after the live premiere, and normally after live premieres, the chat does cut off and you can't look back at it, just that section. So the only other points that were made by Taylina was at the end of it saying, can you see it on Google Earth? And maybe what Taylina was getting at there was, if you can't see it on Google Earth, then it's not public information or something. But obviously my response was, yes, you can see it on Google Earth. You could at least see it on Google Earth from 2021 to 2023 because it was outdated imagery. Okay, 2019 imagery. And if that wasn't good enough, because there's always that in between, the relevancy to the case being specific. Well, of course, Bing Maps, 2022 satellite imagery. And the last time I checked, which was just a few months ago, it still showed the location of Don Hatley's place. And basically when piecing it all together, which was fairly easy to do, providing you were somewhat aware in the first place and knew where to look, even though it's still public, you know, publicly viewable and accessible, just a slight prompt in the right direction, even if it's just a level of interest. Oh, I'll just head on over to the documentary. I'll watch the documentary, available on YouTube by the odd channel out there, if you've seen it. Watch the first part of the documentary, part 2 or so of the first chapter, if you want to call it that, chapter 1. Reference to Don Hatley, photo shown, map shown, aerial footage shown from Heavy D's footage. Shows the trailers, shows the vehicles all outlined, titled Don Hatley's place of living. Okay. Does it give coordinates? No. But is it easy to compare that with on the maps? Yes. And pretty self-explanatory, okay? Might take a little bit of time, but it's fairly easy to do, okay? So it's publicly labelled as, what you see there is Don Hatley's place. And when you match it up to Google Earth, which is, well, Bing Maps, if you want to be relevant to the timing of it, 2022 imagery, it's exactly the same because it's the same exact location. And then if you wish to pin the point and get the coordinates, there you go, voila, all public to begin with. So yes, it is available on the maps to respond back to Taylina's question. So it is publicly viewable. And of course, the blame could be thrown back to me, or it could be thrown back to a general public person saying, well, you know, it's such a big issue or whatnot, or you're so passionate and questioning about the location, then why didn't you reveal it earlier then? Why didn't you check it out earlier then? Well, it's just because I wasn't aware of it at the time. I did watch the documentary, but I was more focused at the time on all the audio and not what was visually on the screen. Okay, I might have looked down at the wrong time when watching the documentary, and then when I looked back up, it was a different slide. But a key viewer on my channel watched the documentary themselves and saw it for themselves, and even went on maps and found the direct comparison of the same thing. So there you go. I said, we've not heard any official information in the case to say that Don Hatley's place is a key hotspot or that's where Dylan Rounds was found. None of that has been mentioned, right? So there's a bit of mystery. But as for just the simple point of location, you know, something so simple, dragged out for so long, how unnecessary. But the response and attitude from some out there hasn't been quite positive, as Taylina has demonstrated with a bit of an argumentative, defensive behaviour. And let's just look at the screenshots right now just to put that into play. This is the first slide where the conversations came up. We've got a person called Pumpton's Lake's Fat Pig and a profile picture of Bob Farrell from the looks of it. Obviously, this is like some kind of joke account, whatever, it is what it is. But we focus on in between Stifler's mom, also known as Taylina, and there's a profile picture of the individual. Now, if anyone gets in a twist or complains, oh, profile picture being shown, well, that's by their choice to have it on their public profile. Okay? Now, Taylina says in response, no one knew where Dylan Rounds was buried at. Didn't want people around the area just in case. So basically, Taylina is suggesting that there was a chance that Dylan Rounds could have been near or on site of Don Hatley's place of living. Not guaranteed, but a chance. And in revealing the location, the area, it could harm the case if anyone went to that place and stumbled across Dylan's remains or any key evidence. I understand that, but because we obviously know by now that the location was publicly revealed long beforehand, there was no need for secrecy, there was no need for gatekeeping the area, and it was already of public knowledge. It probably would have already been investigated or looked into in the background, just like how people did say not everything is talked about publicly and that the police may have operated or not in the past. So kind of backtracking there in a way. But for Taylina to say no one knew where Dylan Rounds was buried at, well, if no one knew, how come James Brenner was able to lead authorities to the location to recover Dylan Rounds' remains? Yeah. So basically, Taylina has used poor wording here, basically. I kind of get what she's referring to, but, you know, it's poor wording. To say no one knew, well, that would mean Dylan Rounds wouldn't be found till this day. He would still be missing, but he has been found. So clearly, some knew where he was. But, I've heard in the background, maybe a little bit unrelated, but maybe possibly Taylina is referring to it in this context in relation to what Bob Farrell or Jim Terry has mentioned in recent time about accusing or labelling Kurt Wadsworth as being responsible for knowing the location of Dylan Rounds' body, where it was buried at, and not telling anyone. Maybe Taylina is referring this comment here aimed in that direction to defend Kurt. Maybe. Whatever. But, you know, Taylina didn't want people around that area. Okay. Anything else? And then here we go to the main part. Taylina then says, I don't care, Warlight Wrath, if I hurt your feelings to not have coordinates to Don Hatley's place. It was not needed to be on UT. What, on Utah? Or in Utah? What the hell are you talking about there? What's the next slide? Yeah, okay. So I just simply responded back saying, so, Taylina, again, you say, I don't care if it hurt your feelings. Well, how does one know if the other has feelings to begin with? One may not. But second of all, the other thing to highlight, feelings can't be hurt if one doesn't go through pain in the first place. And the reality is, Taylina has not caused any suffering upon my soul or my channel, from at least what I'm aware of. All that simply happened is Taylina has appeared to be a gatekeeper of information, claiming it to be sensitive and not known to the public, whilst actually in the background, it is of public knowledge if you look in the right area. Now, was Taylina aware of the Dylan Rounds documentary? Did she watch it? If she didn't, maybe that's why Taylina isn't fully informed on the Dylan Rounds case. Then I could understand it. But it's typical how humans jump to the line of, oh, I hurt your feelings, or other people in life say, why are you so upset? Why are you crying? Why are you mad? And it tends to be through text-based communication where you can't see the person's facial reactions. You may not even hear their voice or tone of it. So people do jump the gun when it comes to observations of human emotion. But we can get more into that later. So already Taylina being defensive, argumentative, saying, I don't care if I hurt your feelings, not to have coordinates. It's kind of like implying that, Warlike Wrath, the whole world doesn't orbit around you, nor does the information, okay? That level of entitlement of wanting to know this and that. I have heard other people, use that rough sentence structure aimed towards me in the past when it came to maybe other details on the case. And once again, in this specific situation, what was gatekept was of public knowledge to begin with. So why is it such a big deal? And similar to that sentence, Taylina says, then why do you make such a big deal about not knowing? Should have got the info from Corey. So I don't know if that last part of her sentence was being sarcastic because Badger Life says Corey is a liar, and Corey does seem like an unstable individual, and even Taylina supposedly agrees with it by saying, yeah, but many people fell for her lies, and that was in a different sentence. I don't know if it shows up here. Yes, I know, but many people believed her. Right, so I'm assuming that Taylina is being sarcastic here, saying that I should have listened to Corey when information was being given out. At the end of the day, Corey, from what I can remember, never told me the location of Don's, nor made an attempt to do so. Corey was more so obsessed on the individuals as to who was responsible on the day of the death of Dylan, and that was really it, like a broken record. So that's invalid there. But for Taylina to say, why do you make such a big deal about not knowing the location of Don's place? I mean, once again, humans always love to jump the gun. It's typical in life. When I make a simple observation and when I talk in a neutral or monotone voice, people seem to imply that that means one is overreacting. I'd really like to know what is the definition of not overreacting then. Is it just basically flatlining and just being dead, not even opening one's mouth? Or does it get to the point of if your mouth is open but you're dead, that's seen as overreacting and being overdramatic? Oh, I'm sorry. See, it's just very silly behaviour this, very immature and unnecessary, okay? For Taylina to say, why do you make such a big deal about a situation? Why are you making such a big deal yourself, acting as a gatekeeper of information, claiming it's very sensitive and it can't be revealed and it's probably best not to, even though it's publicly available in the background, which you're not aware of? So it seems like you're in a completely different reality. Are you connected within the Dylan Rounds case? And when I say that, I don't mean in on it. I'm just saying, are you down to earth, ground zero, or is your head floating in the clouds? Because it seems like you weren't even aware about this public information, which you were claiming was kind of private and sensitive, which is completely wrong and invalid. So by making such a big deal There's a level of importance, of course, because of your behaviour, not exactly complying or communicating well and being argumentative and being defensive, etc. I mean, early on you say, I don't care if I hurt your feelings, but at the same time you care enough to know why am I making supposedly such a big deal about the situation. I mean, Taylina, you're bordering on to Bob Farrell-like mentality of saying, I don't care, but at the same time I do, and that's why I'm still going on. And being defensive, and being defensive, and so on, and so on. You hear my tone of voice, it's no different to all the other times I've done videos, just following through with formal procedures. When humans do act out in a case, for whatever reason it may be, it needs to be looked at out of interest, for research purposes, educational reasons, psychological reasons, etc. If Taylina doesn't like that, tough. Stop being argumentative, stop demonstrating an idiosyncratic behaviour, and things should be okay. I mean, Taylina got defensive in the past when I was being sceptical of Kurt Wadsworth, and obviously it's very natural for Taylina to defend her father, you know, like what families do, but one should understand that the other is simply sceptical because of the nature and behaviour of that said individual acting out in questionable ways, okay? And Taylina was acting in a questionable way as well, with the whole gatekeeping side. All I'm doing is documenting it as we go along so we know who is who and what people have done within the case or within the community or both. Hopefully you understand that, Taylina, by now. Moving on, is there anything else? And here we go. Taylina said, sometimes things don't need to be made public. And that's very true. But on this occasion, it's completely invalid and wrong. Because if you're referring to Don Hatley's place of living being of sensitive information and that the location is best to be kept private during the case and investigation, if that still applies now, or more so at least in the past, it should remain quiet in the background, just like how some of the searches were done, the private ones in the washers, so no one else comes along and cause disruptance, disturbance, such as Ty Corbyn, Lance Kelly, etc., and maybe other strangers out there. I get that, but once again, it's invalid in this situation because if you are referring to stuff that shouldn't be made public, like Don's place, it was made public. It was revealed publicly, and it was very easy to connect the dots as well. So I think Taylina is on another planet with her attitude, her mindset. And as I said, it was made of public knowledge within the documentary. There's really no other way to make it clearer to understand. I would say that concludes it for now. Hopefully you found this video of interest. Feel free to like and share it so more people learn about it. And of course, if there's any more Dylan Rounds updates, leads, bits of information, whatever it may be that comes next, I'll try and cover it. In the meantime, I'll just look at other things to do, you know, returning case or something completely different. Depends what mood I'm in and what works and what doesn't. So thanks for watching. See you next time, whenever that is. Goodbye, good night for now.